Welcome to this lecture, a exercise 11.9 walkthrough. In this exercise, we'll create a data formula to calculate order processing time using the datediff function. This is a walkthrough of your 11.9 exercise, which you will be submitting for a grade. In summary, we're going to start with exercise 7.3, which you should have completed previously. If you haven't, then now's a good time to stop the video and go back and finish that, and then come back and resume. We're going to create a formula field for a calculated field called order processing time. We'll go down and find the datediff function, and then we'll populate that to give us a difference in days between the order date and the order ship date. Then we're going to rearrange some of the formatting in the report as it currently stands under the old 7.3. We're going to update that so that we suppress the time from the order date and ship date field report because we don't need that level of detail. That won't, of course, change the underlying data. It just changes the way that it is formatted for output. So the underlying precision is maintained. And we'll make those fields a little bit smaller. We'll shift everything to the left, and then we can have some room to add our order processing time formula. And we'll go ahead and add that in. And that also, we're only interested in whole days, not fractional days. So we'll adjust the formatting to eliminate any decimal places. And at that point, the exercise will be complete, and we can go ahead and export it to PDF to submit for a grade. Welcome to our walkthrough of exercise 11.9. We'll be creating a date formula to calculate order processing time. To begin, let's open completed report 7.3. With 7.3 open, let's go ahead and save it under a new name. And the new report we're working on is E11.9 calculate order processing time. All right, the first thing we need to do is we need to create a formula field. So let's go to the Field Explorer and open up the formula field. Right-click and say New. And let's give that a name and call it order processing time. Okay. And that expands out into the formula workshop. And let's explore the functions here. And with the functions expanded out, if we come down to date and time, we'll find that there's a couple for datediff. We want the first one, so let's double click that. And let's go ahead and populate that. So we need to tell it that we're talking about days. And the field that we're going to use is going to come from the orders table. And it's going to be order date. And then the other field that we're going to use also comes from the orders table. As soon as I put the curly brace up, the table selector comes up, and I'm going to pick again the orders table. And the field that we're interested here is the ship date. And with that calculated formula completed, we can click Save and Close. And now we'll need to make a little room for that on our original report. So if you look at the original report, we have some extraneous detail here. We really don't need to take up this much time or this much space rather, to show the time of the order date and the ship date. For this report's purpose, that detail is not important, so we can suppress it. It's still going to be preserved. It doesn't change the data, but we're going to change the way it is formatted. So let's come back over to the design view, and let's come in here and right click, and let's change the format of the field. And it knows in context it's a date time. So let's change that so that we're just getting, and let's go ahead and use the zeros leading before the month and day because it'll make things line up nicely and still preserve space, but we're dropping off the time. And let's do that also. Right click and come into format the field and do the same thing for the ship date. Okay, and just let's take a quick look at the preview. So now we see that's much less space and it lines up really nicely, so it's very easy to read. Let's come back to the design view. We don't need this much space anymore, so let's come down into the field, get the double-headed arrow, and oops, I moved it by mistake. I can undo that with Control Z. Get the double-headed arrow, and then let's shrink that down about like so, and we can just drag our guide over, and ship date should follow it, and we can take this one and do the same thing as far as shrinking down the field a bit. Let's add another guide here for the where we'd like the order date to be, and let's just slide that over. And bump it up against that guide. There we go. And then drag this guide over as well. And don't have a guide here for quantity, so let's drop another guide in there. Put that about where we want it and slide the quantity over to bump up against it. And again, if we've misaligned anything in dragging, you can always come select all of the fields and to get them lined up vertically, right click and let's align to all the tops. And so now that should look nice. And it does. All right. So now we have plenty of room for our calculated field. And so let's go ahead and add that in. Maybe drop another guide in here to position it, and come back over to our formula fields. Under the Field Explorer, there's our order processing time that we added, and drop that in there. Take a look. Looks pretty good, except I really don't need to have the 0.00. A 0 would suffice. We don't need the fractional part, the decimals. So let's go ahead and suppress that part. We'll only be dealing with whole hours here. So let's go ahead and, or whole days, I should say, not hours. And so let's go back to the design. And if we right click on that, again, we can format the field and we can change the display so that the decimals are suppressed. And let's preview that. And that's looking pretty nice. All right, so if we've got it the way we want it, we can now save the report again to preserve our changes. And if we're ready to submit this report, we can go ahead and generate the PDF file. File, export, and let's export the report. Let's make it PDF, and we'll export the entire report. And the default name is fine, and I'm going to move that up to where I'm saving the other report. So we're working on this term. You can do the same wherever you're saving it, whatever's convenient. And now we've got our PDF file and ready to submit, and that concludes this lesson. This concludes the lesson.